This first video is going to focus on creating just a basic portrait using some of the basic colors from the portrait and the eyedropper tool. So to get started with this style, you're going to open up a new document. So I'm going to go to File, New, and then try to keep the size somewhere between 8 to maybe 12 inches. So I'm just going to do 10 by 10 and making sure this is set to inches and not pixels. I'll hit Create so it opens up a blank image. Then I'm going to go to File, Place, and find the picture that I'm working with. And once I have that selected, I'm just going to click and drag across the screen to place the picture. And then we're going to be working with a couple of different layers, but we're going to start with creating a new layer for the background. So I'm going to lock my picture layer so that that's out of the way. So I hit that little lock button, added a new layer, and then I'm going to double click and call that background layer. And if we go back to the example, that is the layer that's going to look like this. So it's just a basic outline of everything going on in the background, and then we'll add the facial features and then the detailed layer on top. So again, on this background layer, I'm just going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to outline all the way around the face. And I'm going to hit that little slash button by the Shift key on my keyboard to get rid of the fill, so that it makes it easier to see just my outline. So again, I'm just going all the way around with just my outline. I can go around the outside of the hair as well, but it kind of depends on the picture. You could ignore the hair for now, and then we'll come back and do that on the second layer. But I'm going to still go around it, and then take your time as you're going around this, but I'm going to jump to the next step once this is filled in. I have the entire face and then the neck selected here with the pen tool. I'm going to hit I on my keyboard for the eyedropper tool, and then I'm going to select a medium value. So we're going to go back and work with highlights and shadows later on the detailed layer, but for now just choose somewhere that's going to have a medium skin tone color. And then once you do that, you can grab the pen tool again and start outlining around the shirt or anything else that is in your image that you need to include on this background layer. So it depends on the picture, but again, just kind of outline the basics of things. When I get to here, I'm not going to worry too much about going back around the neck, because when I use the eyedropper tool and fill it with a color, I can click with 2 fingers on it or right click, go to Arrange, and then Send to Back. So that way more of the details come to the forward. So try to work with the different layouts in order to kind of save yourself some time and effort with details there. So now that my background layer is filled in, I'm going to lock it. I'm going to hide that layer, add a new layer, and I'm going to go back and call this one Facial Features. And we're going to work on outlining some of the basic facial features in this composition here. So again, if I go back to the example layer, you can see the facial feature layer looks like this, where I have the hair filled in, the ears, eyes, lips, and then we'll do some details of the nose as well on this one. So I'm going to zoom in and we'll start with the eyes. I'm going to grab that pen tool and we can just outline the white part of the eyes here. I'm going to hit that slash to get rid of the fill. And remember to outline with as few anchor points as possible. And don't worry too much about details yet. And I'm going to actually, for right now, leave that unfilled because I want to add the circle or the middle part of the eye on here as well. I'm going to actually grab the ellipse tool. If you have the rectangle tool there, just click and hold it down to grab the ellipse tool. Then I'm going to click and drag across the eye and make that the right size. I'm just going to stretch it out. And then I'm going to actually copy, so Command C and then paste, Command V, and move that copied layer of the circle over to the other eye as well, just to save a little bit of time there. And then I'm going to fill in the circle of the eye. So I for eyedropper, grab that medium value, and then I'll select the outside and fill that in with the white of the eye. And then I'm going to grab my other eye there, and then go back to the pen tool and outline the white part of the eye. So remember, as you're working, if you want to get rid of that fill, you can hit the slash button by the shift tool, and that will hide your fill so it doesn't get in the way as you're working. Now, if the layer order gets messed up here, if you again right click, go to arrange, and then send to back so that the top part of the eye will come through. So now I'm going to use that pen tool, go around the mouth, I'm going to go around the ears, and then the hair as well. So I'm going to hide this, going around the lips, fill that in. Again, don't worry too much about details of those shadows or any of those other areas yet. When you're outlining the hair, it's up to you how much detail you want to include for right now. You don't necessarily need too much yet, but you might want to include just a few areas where the hair might kind of come down a little bit to give it just some minor detail. And again, later on, we'll come back and fill some of those spots in more. So I'm going to continue going around the hair, and then I'm going to fill in the ears, and we'll come back and look at the next step. Now I brought all those layers back just to see what it currently looks like. So again, you've got all of just the basics on here. And I'm going to hide those layers again and lock all of them. Add my new layer, and on this layer I'm going to call it details because we are going to go back with all the highlights, shadows, and details using the width tool. So to do that, I'm going to use the pen tool, and we'll start with the eyes. I'm going to really zoom in. And the width tool, you're able to create some of these just kind of basic highlights and shadows by extending your pen tool out. So I'm going to outline around any lines that I want to bring back with different highlights and shadows. And I'm going to use that eyedropper tool to grab that darker brown color. Now I want to use this as the stroke instead of fill because I want that to be just a line across there. So I'm going to switch where my stroke and fill are so that now that line has the brown on it versus a fill. And then on my keyboard I'm going to hit Shift W for the width tool, and I'm going to just play around with expanding how I want those lines to look. So I'm going to extend those out a little bit. So when I bring my layer back, you can see that I just went in and added that little bit of a detail there, so that little line. I'm going to go in and continue to just add details. So with the pen tool here, I can go into the outline of the eye, use the eyedropper, grab that darker value for the eyelashes, switch it to just the outline or the fill, Shift W, and I'm expanding the eyelashes out there. I can outline the details of the darker value around the outside of the eye. So I'm going to create an outline there with my pen tool, hit I, grab that darker green, and then Shift W and play around with how that looks on the outside of the eye. You can extend certain areas so that the size completely changes, so play around with the width tool and how you want that to look. And then I can even do it for this darker part of the eye as well. So you're going to use that width tool for a lot of the details. So again, here it is zoomed out with more of those details in the eye. So it's starting to come to life here with some of the details. But keep going, keep looking for areas where you can go in with highlights and shadows. So for example, on the nose here, I've got this darker value on the outside. So I can grab that darker color and then use the width tool to expand it. And then we can even do the inside of the nose. To expand that out as well. And then look for highlights too. So on the right side of the nose here is a highlight. Grab that eyedropper tool, look for a lighter area that we can use. Shift W and extend that out. And then an example of the lips is where you could almost outline this entire line that's in between the lips. And I'm going to use that eyedropper tool, grab that darker value, switch it to the stroke. And then you can play around with where the width tool goes for the lips or some of those details. And then the hair is where I would really use this a lot too. So I'm going to follow some of the directions of the streaks of the hair. Use that eyedropper tool to grab some of those lighter values first. So we'll work with just some of the highlights, extend those out. Keep hitting P for the pen tool. Maybe bring in some shadows as well. And again, I'm just following that direction of where the hair is. And extending that out. So again, when I bring these back, this is what it looks like with what I just did. But we can go back and look at the other finished product here with all of those details on top. So again, you can see I went in and added a lot of the details with the eye. Here's what the nose looks like. So going back with some of the details, there's some highlights, shadows. I went over the lips with a couple of highlights too. And then the jawline as well. So this is an important one, trying to define where the edge of the chin and the neck are. And then some in the ears. And then a lot of that detail with the hair. You'll notice with the eyebrows, I actually went back in with the paintbrush tool, which is something that you can do as well for some of that extra detail. And just use that eyedropper tool to grab color. And then with the brush tool, you can change the size of it and add some of the details in some extra areas where you might need them. And then there's a lot you can do to continue making your project a little bit more creative with your portraits. So I added this blue circle in the background that adds a little bit to it, this black bounding box on the outside. Think about if there's anything else that could be interesting. So maybe even hiding some of your layers to see how different things look. So this could be interesting to maybe do your entire portrait with just the width tool. Or maybe go back and add a drop shadow to some of your layers or play around with the opacity. So think back to that practice that we did and all the different edits that you can do. If you Google search portraits, there's a lot of different types out there that you can play around with as well with this style. So maybe doing something different with the hair color or playing around with gradients. So maybe instead of using the regular skin color, you use a gradient on your image. So get creative with these. Again, Google search for some different ideas of what could be interesting. Maybe you do some different outlines in areas and then just color in others. So be creative and have fun with it.